Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Al24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next in our World News program. President Zelensky says his country is at a turning point in its conflict with Russian forces appearing to be regrouping for a possible advancement on the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. Plus, Melitopol has been taken by Russian soldiers occupying the southern Ukrainian town, and President Zelensky calls on mothers of Russian soldiers to prevent their sons from being sent to war in Ukraine. Following a request from Russia, the Security Council gathered for an open meeting on Ukraine, citing allegations of military biological activity in Ukraine. And intensifying European support for Ukraine, the Union is imposing new sanctions against the Kremlin and a plan to end the EU's fossil dependence on Russia by 2027. Welcome again, and we start with the latest updates regarding the Russian and Ukrainian thorny file. Fighting is raging northwest of Kiev, with the bulk of Russian ground forces 25 kilometers from the center of the capital, Ukrainian Kiev. Russia's bombardment of Ukraine's widens, with raids reported on east-central city of Dnipro and airfields in western Lutsk and Ivano-Frankivsk. Ukrainian officials say Russian shelling again prevented evacuations from Mariupol, where conditions are critical. United States and its top allies are revoking Russia's most favored nation status amid pressure campaign on President Vladimir Putin to end the war. And Ukrainian envoy to the United Nations dismisses Moscow accusation that Kiev is operating US-backed biological weapons laboratories as insane delirium. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country is at a turning point in its conflict, with Russian forces appearing to be regrouping for a possible advancement on the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. Let's have a listen.
It's impossible to say how many days we will still need to free our land, but it is possible to say that we will do it, because we strived for that. Because we have reached a strategic turning point, we are already moving towards our goal, towards our victory.
Mayor of Melitopol has been taken by Russian soldiers occupying the southern Ukrainian town, says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who calls on mothers of Russian soldiers to prevent their sons from being sent to war in Ukraine.
Today in Melitopol, the invaders captured the city's mayor, Ivan Fedorov, a man who bravely defends Ukraine and the members of his community. This is obviously a sign of the invaders' weakness.
Вони не зустрічний світ, тому захоплення мера Мелітополя – це злочин.
I want to say this to Russian mothers, especially mothers of new recruits. Do not send your children to war in a foreign country. Do not believe promises that they will be sent just somewhere for exercises, or just somewhere, and they won't fight. See where your son is.
Gunfire were heard in Ukraine's capital amid unverified reports that the fighting had already reached the heart of Kiev. Explosions sounded nearby Kiev as Russian troops approached the Ukrainian capital. The explosion has not yet been confirmed to be from Russian or Ukrainian soldiers. According to Serhiy Haidai, the governor of Luhansk, approximately 70% of Luhansk region in the eastern Ukraine is occupied by Russian troops, while areas that remained under the control of Ukraine faced constant shelling and dozens of civilians were injured or killed. The governor of Luhansk wrote on his social media that there were no humanitarian corridors for people to safely leave the region. Air raid sirens were heard across most Ukrainian cities early on Saturday morning, urging people to seek shelters. Sirens were heard in the capital city of Kiev, the western city of Lviv, in Odessa and Kharkiv, Cherkasy, as well as in the Sumy region in northeast of the country, a number of local Ukrainian media reported. And following a request from Russia, the Security Council gathered on Friday for an open meeting on Ukraine, citing allegations of military biological activity in the European country. Marwa Bil'Aywar.
The UN Security Council has turned into a field of accusations of misinformation and manipulation between the West and Russia, on the occasion of a meeting requested by Moscow on the alleged presence in Ukraine of biological weapons coordinated with the United States. The Russian permanent representative of the UN, Vasily Nevezhya, said during the meeting that the Ukraine and the US are plotting to use a biological weapons program.
On the territory of Ukraine, there is a network of at least 30 biological laboratories in which very dangerous biological experiments are carried out, aimed at reinforcing the pathogenic qualities of plague, anthrax, tularemia, cholera, and other deadly diseases using synthetic biology.
For her part, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations denied Russia's allegation, claiming that biological laboratories in Ukraine have nothing to do with chemical arms, and accused Russia of using the UN as a platform to spread disinformation.
Russia has a track record of falsely accusing other countries of the very violations that Russia itself is perpetrating. And given that, and consistent with our previous statements, we have serious concerns that Russia may be planning to use chemical or biological agents against the Ukrainian people.
The UN disarmament chief said that the organization is not aware of any biological weapons program in Ukraine.
I am aware of media reports regarding allegations of biological weapons programs. The United Nations is not aware of any biological weapons programs.
A UN spokesperson said there is no information to confirm that Ukraine has biological weapon labs after the Russian Foreign Ministry claimed that it had received documentations from employees at Ukrainian biolabs.
A Russian law giving Moscow stronger powers to crack down on independent journalism is placing Russia under a total information blackout on the war in Ukraine. UN independent experts said on Friday the move prompted the BBC, Bloomberg and other foreign media to suspend reporting in the country, although the BBC said it was resuming English language reporting from Russia on the 8th of March because of the urgent need to report from inside Russia. And now, intensifying European support for Ukraine, the Union is imposing new sanctions against the Kremlin and a plan to end the EU's fossil dependence on Russia by 2027. Miriam Zian.
After the 2 days European summit, which ended Friday in Versailles, the 27 members of the European family reiterated their support for Ukraine. Massive new sanctions, energy dependence, financial support for Ukrainian forces, and food sovereignty were on the agenda of the summit. The President of the European Commission said that the EU activated the Temporary Protective Directive for the first time in European Union's history, granting Ukrainians residency rights, access to labor market and schools. Ursula also stated that Ukraine's admission to the European Union is in the process, confirming that Ukraine is a family member.
There are conditions to be part of the European Union that have to be met.
As for Europe's dependence on energy and raw materials, Scholz expressed that Europe should free itself from dependence step by step.
We will work together to gradually free ourselves from this dependence by developing alternative resources for our imports of oil, gas and coal.
French President Emmanuel Macron, when asked by a journalist about sanctions, said that nothing is taboo and that they're ready to punish beyond what has been done.
I have the certainty if things continue on the military level, in the straight line of what you have just described, that we will take new sanctions, including massive sanctions.
Macron also noted that food sovereignty in Europe and Africa is threatened, emphasizing that they must prepare and reassess their production strategies.
And now let's have a listen to the word of Ned Price, spokesman for the United States Department regarding imposing new economic sanctions on Ukraine.
The United States, acting in concert with our G7 partners today, took further steps to hold Russia to account. We announced additional actions against wealthy Russian elites to ensure the government of Russia pays a severe economic and diplomatic price for its invasion of Ukraine, including actions against individuals who sit on the boards of major Russian financial institutions.
United States Vice President Kamala Harris held a press conference in Bucharest with Romanian President Klaus Iohannis, during which she reiterates the United States' commitment to defend NATO and affirms that there will be further announcements on actions the US will take to ensure serious consequences for Vladimir Putin.
And to demonstrate our commitment as the United States, in recent weeks, we sent a 1,000-member Stryker squadron that creates a total force of 2,000 American troops who are prepared to stand in defense of our commitment to the NATO alliance and the eastern flank. We have taken recent action, including a commitment of $13.6 billion for Ukraine and the region in terms of security assistance and humanitarian assistance.
In another blow to the Russian economy, US President Joe Biden announced new sanctions against Russia on Friday, downgrading trade ties with Moscow and banning the key Russian imports come amid a raft of new economic sanctions the Biden administration is imposing on Moscow. Nabil Khazini.
Few days after the United States announced it will no longer receive Russian oil, US President Joe Biden announced from the White House that his administration issued an executive order blocking US import of key Russian products.
We're also taking a further step of banning imports of goods from several signature sectors of the Russian economy, including seafoods, vodka, and diamonds. And we're going to continue to squeeze Putin. The G7 will seek to deny Russia the ability to borrow from leading multinational institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank.
The action will block more than $1 billion in Russian revenues, and according to the White House, the fresh export restrictions are valued at nearly $550 million per year. Biden said the decision was taken in coordination with NATO allies, the European Union and the G7.
Later today, together with other NATO allies in the G7, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, as well as the European Union, we're going to jointly announce several new steps to squeeze Putin and hold him even more accountable for his aggression against Ukraine.
US President added the G7 is imposing further sanctions to more Russian oligarchs, and the US will move to revoke most favored nation trade status for Russia.
The G7 is also stepping up pressure on corrupt Russian billionaires. We're adding new names to the list of oligarchs and their families that we're targeting. And we're increasing coordination among the G7 countries to target and capture their ill-begotten gains.
Canada is also imposing new sanctions on dozens of military entities in Russia and 5 individuals close to the Russian President Vladimir Putin, including Roman Abramovich. The individuals targeted will have their assets frozen and will no longer be able to profit or benefit from business dealings in Canada.
Ukraine and Russia have been known as the breadbasket of Europe for centuries. However, the military operation of Russia on Ukraine and the sanctions imposed on Russia by the West had severe consequences on the global food system, threatening many countries that depend on them. Hussein Berkan reports.
The prolongation of military operation of Russia in Ukraine raises fears of an outbreak of food crisis in several countries, which usually import grains, especially wheat, as their global prices touch their peak for the first time in 14 years. This week, Ukraine decided to ban the export of wheat, oat, and other staple foods that are essential to the global food supply, and Russia also banned the export of wheat and about 200 other commodities.
Russia and Ukraine exports represent 12% of all the food calories traded in the world. The two countries account for almost 30% of global wheat exports, almost 20% of corn exports, more than 80% of the world's supply of sunflower oil.
Much of Ukraine harvest was due to be exported to North Africa, the Middle East, and Levant, according to the United Nations World Food Programme.
About half of the wheat consumed in Lebanon in 2020 came from Ukraine, according to data from the Food and Agriculture Organization, as Lebanon relies on bread and other grain products for 35% of its food.
For some countries, rising prices could hammer governments as well as consumers because of state of food subsidies. Sanctions imposed on Russia by many nations now means that wheat already harvested and stored there isn't being bought. As for Ukraine, the market has adjusted to the probability that wheat harvested and stored last season won't be shipped.
The Russian ruble fell 8.1% this week, having lost over 32% of its value over the past 21 days. The ruble has lost a third of its value in Moscow exchanges since Russia started its military operation in Ukraine last month, as the local economy is under the pressure of sanctions imposed across the world against Russia's economy. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said that the U.S. economy was strong while acknowledging that inflation was a problem and there would be spillovers from sanctions against Russia over its military operation of Ukraine. She also added that a tighter monetary policy to fight inflation could cause a recession, but said that she had confidence in the Federal Reserve's ability to balance the situation. The United States accused Russia of violating nuclear safety principles in Ukraine and demanded its forces to stop firing on nuclear power plants, but added that there were no signs detected yet of any radiological release. While Facebook and Instagram fight the Palestinian content, Meta platforms are allowing Facebook users to call for violence against Russians and Russian soldiers. Facebook's owner said that a temporary change in its content policy limited to Ukraine was needed to enable users to express their opposition to Russia's military operation, as Russia filed a lawsuit after the company said it would allow posts like "Death to Russia, invaders." And following the Russian military operation, more than 2.5 million refugees have been forced to flee Ukraine, while an additional 1.85 million people have been displaced internally within the country in the space of 2 weeks. Refugees crossed the neighboring countries, mostly to Poland, Hungary and Slovakia. Authorities said Guatemala received its first arrivals of Ukrainian families fleeing their homeland since Russia's military operation in Ukraine. 8 Ukrainians were the first to arrive in the Central American country. Another flight carrying more Ukrainians arrived several hours later. And finally, away from the Russian-Ukrainian file, let's follow these summaries about what's happening in different parts of the world with Sofian Kentori.
Turkmenistan is holding a closely controlled snap election, with outgoing President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov's son expected to win the vote. In the ex-Soviet Central Asian country, in the 6 million strong republic, 9 candidates are on the ballot. President Berdimuhamedov, who has dominated public life since the death of the country's founding president in 2006, has stepped down in favor of his 40-year-old son Serdar Berdimuhamedov. Yahudi Ernesto Perez Becerra promised to be an architect of peace as he started his congressional candidacy in one of Colombia's most dangerous areas. The candidate planned to battle corruption and bring change to Catatumbo, a Venezuelan border area, but his commitment was met by hostility by those in authority, not the Colombian government, but a poisonous coalition of armed factions vying for power. After Pakistan warned that the event might have unpleasant repercussions, India said it mistakenly launched a missile into Pakistan this week, owing to a technical fault during normal maintenance. Discussions has begun by experts at the World Health Organization on how and when to call an end to a global COVID-19 crisis, exploring what would be an important milestone more than 2 years after emergence of the virus.
And now it's time to have a reminder of our main top stories. President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country is at a turning point in its conflict with Russian forces, appear to be regrouping for a possible advancement on the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. Melitopol has been taken by Russian soldiers occupying the southern Ukrainian town, and President Zelensky calls on mothers of Russian soldiers to prevent their sons from being sent to war in Ukraine. Following a request from Russia, the Security Council gathered for an open meeting on Ukraine, citing allegations of military biological activity in Ukraine. And intensifying European support for Ukraine, the Union is imposing new sanctions against the Kremlin and a plan to end the EU's fossil dependence on Russia by 2027. That's all for me, Nadia Kasmi, and the rest of the team. The news continues on Al 24 News. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.